Sometimes the worst day of your life is only 5 minutes away from becoming the best one. Emma Parker stared at the empty chair across from her table and checked her phone for the sixth time in 20 minutes. The message she had been hoping to receive never came. No apology. No explanation. No last-minute emergency. Just silence. Around her, the Saturday afternoon crowd filled the cafe with conversations, laughter, and the comforting sounds of coffee machines and clinking cups. Yet Emma felt completely alone. She had almost canceled the date that morning. As a single mother raising her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, she rarely made time for herself. Between work, school schedules, grocery shopping, and helping with homework, there was little room left for romance. But after months of encouragement from friends, she had finally agreed to meet someone. Now she wished she had stayed home. Embarrassment slowly replaced disappointment. The waitress approached with a sympathetic smile. "Would you like anything else?" Emma forced a polite smile. "Just the check, please." The waitress nodded knowingly. Unfortunately, everyone in the cafe seemed to understand exactly what had happened. Emma looked out the window and wondered why she had expected anything different. Life had taught her to rely on herself. Perhaps that lesson was repeating itself again. Just as she reached for her purse, the front door suddenly opened. A burst of energy entered the cafe so quickly that nearly everyone turned to look. Four children rushed inside, talking over one another with the enthusiasm only 8-year-olds seemed capable of possessing. Behind them walked a tall man carrying backpacks, jackets, and the expression of someone attempting to manage complete chaos while remaining calm. "Slow down," he called with a laugh. "Nobody is winning a race." The children immediately ignored the instruction. Emma could not help smiling. One little girl pointed excitedly toward a display of pastries, while two boys argued about which cookie was best. Another girl carefully examined a menu as though preparing for an important business negotiation. The exhausted father followed them with remarkable patience. Somehow, despite the commotion, there was warmth in the scene. Real warmth. The kind that came from people who genuinely enjoyed being together. The man finally reached the counter and looked around for a table. Every seat in the crowded cafe appeared occupied. Every seat except one. The empty chair across from Emma. He hesitated. Emma expected him to keep searching. Instead, one of the children spotted the vacant chair and pointed immediately. "Dad, there." The man looked toward Emma and offered an apologetic smile. "I am sorry to ask, but would you mind if we used the extra seats near your table? We seem to have invaded the cafe." Emma laughed softly for the first time all afternoon. "I think the cafe survived." Relief crossed his face. Within moments, the children settled into nearby chairs, still chatting excitedly. Emma watched the father thank each employee, organize jackets, and somehow keep 4 conversations going at once. There was something unexpectedly comforting about the sight. For the first time since being left alone at the cafe, she was no longer thinking about the empty chair. She was thinking about the man who had unknowingly filled the room with life the moment he walked through the door. The cafe quickly became the loudest place on the block, and surprisingly, nobody seemed to mind. Emma watched as the 4 children transformed an ordinary afternoon into something that felt like a small adventure. One boy proudly explained why chocolate chip cookies were superior to every other dessert ever created. Another argued passionately for oatmeal raisin cookies. The 2 girls joined the debate with equal enthusiasm, turning a simple snack decision into a discussion worthy of a national television broadcast. Their father listened patiently while balancing trays, drinks, napkins, and endless questions. Somehow he managed all of it with a smile. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. The disappointment from earlier slowly faded into the background. At one point, one of the girls accidentally dropped a handful of crayons she had been carrying. Before anyone else could react, Emma bent down and helped gather them. "Thank you," the little girl said politely. "You are welcome." The child studied her for a moment. "You look sad." Emma blinked in surprise. Children rarely filtered their observations. "Do I?" The girl nodded. "A little." Before Emma could answer, the girl's father looked genuinely embarrassed. "Chloe, we do not tell strangers they look sad." Chloe frowned thoughtfully. "But she does." Emma laughed softly. "It is okay. She is not wrong." The father smiled apologetically before extending his hand. "I am Daniel Brooks." "Emma Parker." For a moment, something unexpected happened. The noise around them seemed to disappear. Neither understood why. It was simply a brief moment of connection between two people who looked far more tired than they wanted the world to know. Daniel returned to managing his energetic group while Emma settled back into her seat. Yet she found herself observing him occasionally. Not because he was handsome, although he certainly was. It was the way he interacted with the children. Every conversation received his full attention. Every question mattered. Every small problem was treated seriously. It was obvious they trusted him completely. That impressed Emma more than anything else could have. A few minutes later, Daniel returned to her table carrying a fresh cup of coffee. "I hope this is not strange," he said, "but I noticed you never finished your first one." Emma looked surprised. "You did not have to do that." "Probably not," Daniel admitted. "But it seemed like your afternoon could use a small improvement." For a second, Emma almost told him about the date that never arrived. Instead, she simply smiled. "Thank you." One of the boys suddenly appeared beside them. "Dad, are we bothering her?" Daniel opened his mouth to answer, but Emma spoke first. "Not at all." The boy grinned. "Good. Because Olivia wants to know if you think dragons would make good pets." Emma laughed. "That depends. How often do they set things on fire?" The boy's eyes widened. "That is actually a very important question." Within seconds, all four children gathered around her table, each offering a different opinion about dragons, superheroes, and imaginary adventures. Daniel watched the scene with disbelief. Normally his children were cautious around strangers. Yet somehow they had accepted Emma almost immediately. As the afternoon continued, he found himself becoming curious about the woman who had arrived looking lonely, but now sat surrounded by laughter. And for the first time that day, Emma forgot completely about the empty chair that had seemed so important only an hour earlier. By the time the afternoon sun began lowering across the city, Emma felt as though she had known Daniel's children far longer than a few hours. Ethan wanted to explain every rule of a board game he had invented. Olivia insisted on showing Emma her collection of animal stickers. Mason was determined to prove that he could solve any math problem faster than anyone else. Chloe continued asking unexpected questions that somehow revealed more about people than they intended to share. The energy surrounding the table was impossible to ignore. Several customers smiled as they passed by. Even the cafe staff seemed entertained by the lively group. Daniel sat back for a moment and watched the scene unfold. He could not remember the last time his children had connected with someone so quickly. Since becoming a single father, he had grown accustomed to handling everything himself. School events, doctor appointments, homework, meals, and bedtime routines had become part of a carefully organized system. The children were happy, but Daniel rarely introduced new people into their lives. Trust had become something he offered carefully. Yet here they were, acting as though Emma had always belonged at the table. "This is unusual," Daniel admitted quietly. Emma looked up. "What is?" He nodded toward the children. "Normally they take weeks to warm up to someone." Emma smiled as Chloe proudly displayed another sticker. "Maybe they are just being friendly." Daniel laughed softly. "No, this is something else." For reasons he could not explain, he found himself wanting to learn more about her. The conversation gradually shifted away from dragons and games. Daniel asked about her work. Emma explained that she managed operations for a local community organization while balancing the responsibilities of raising her daughter, Sophie. When she mentioned being a single parent, Daniel immediately understood a part of her that many people never saw. "How old is Sophie?" he asked. 8. Daniel smiled. "The same age as these four." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You are telling me all four of them are 8 years old?" Daniel nodded. "Quadruplets." Emma stared at him for a moment before laughing. "I thought managing one child was challenging." "It is," Daniel said. "Now imagine 4 people arguing about breakfast before 7 in the morning." That image made Emma laugh even harder. The ease of the conversation surprised both of them. There was no pressure. No need to impress one another. Just two parents who understood the exhaustion, responsibility, and unexpected joys of raising children alone. Eventually, Emma checked the time and realized she needed to leave. Sophie would be expecting her home soon. As she gathered her things, an unexpected wave of disappointment passed through the table. "You are leaving already?" Olivia asked. "I have to," Emma replied. "My daughter is waiting for me." Chloe looked genuinely concerned. "Can we see you again?" Daniel immediately looked embarrassed. "Chloe," but Emma smiled. "Maybe." The children seemed satisfied with that answer. As Emma prepared to leave, Daniel stood. "Thank you," he said. For what? You turn what was supposed to be an ordinary coffee stop into the best part of our week. Emma felt warmth spread through her chest. No one had said something like that to her in a very long time. She smiled before heading toward the door. Just before leaving, she glanced back one final time. All 4 children were waving enthusiastically. Daniel was smiling too. And somehow, neither of them realized that this chance encounter was only the beginning of a story that was about to change both of their lives. For the next several days, Emma expected the unusual afternoon at the cafe to become nothing more than a pleasant memory. Life had a way of moving quickly, especially for single parents. Monday brought work deadlines, school assignments, grocery shopping, and a long list of responsibilities that seemed to grow every hour. Sophie needed help preparing a presentation for class. The washing machine decided to stop working at the worst possible moment. By Wednesday evening, Emma barely had time to sit down for dinner. Yet despite everything, she occasionally found herself thinking about Daniel and his children. More specifically, she found herself smiling whenever she remembered them. Across town, Daniel was experiencing something similar. His schedule was even more demanding than usual. Business meetings filled his mornings. Conference calls occupied his afternoons. Important decisions seemed to arrive every hour. Yet no matter how busy he became, the children continued bringing up Emma. At breakfast, Olivia asked whether Emma liked pancakes. During a car ride, Mason wondered if Emma had favorite superheroes. Chloe simply asked when they were going to see her again. Daniel attempted to avoid the conversation. The children refused to cooperate. By Saturday morning, they had become a united negotiating team. "We should go back to the cafe," Ethan suggested. "Why?" Daniel asked carefully. "Because Emma might be there," Chloe answered immediately. Daniel nearly laughed. "That is not how meeting people works." Olivia crossed her arms. "Then how does it work?" Daniel realized he had no good answer. 2 hours later, he found himself walking toward the same cafe with 4 unusually cheerful children. He told himself it was simply a coincidence. The children clearly did not believe him. To his surprise, Emma was actually there. She sat at an outdoor table helping Sophie work on a school project. The moment Chloe spotted her, she waved enthusiastically. Emma looked up and laughed in disbelief. "No way." Sophie glanced toward the approaching group. "Who are they?" Emma smiled. "A very energetic family." Within minutes, introductions were taking place. Sophie and the Quadruplets immediately discovered they were all 8 years old. That was enough to create an instant connection. Before either parent could stop them, the 5 children were discussing games, favorite books, and school stories as though they had known one another for years. Daniel sat across from Emma and shook his head. "I think we have lost control of the situation." Emma laughed. "I think we lost control the first time they met." The conversation flowed naturally. This time there was no awkwardness, no uncertainty, just 2 adults sharing stories about parenthood. They talked about balancing work and family. They discussed the guilt that often came with feeling stretched too thin. They laughed about embarrassing school events and unexpected parenting disasters. For the first time in a long while, both felt completely understood. As the afternoon continued, Emma noticed something interesting. Daniel rarely talked about himself. Every story eventually returned to the children. Every decision seemed connected to their happiness. It was impossible not to admire that. Meanwhile, Daniel admired Emma's strength. She carried enormous responsibility with quiet grace and never once complained about it. As the sun slowly lowered across the city, neither wanted the day to end. Yet neither fully understood why this connection felt so different. What they did not know was that a discovery waiting just around the corner was about to reveal that their worlds were far more different than either of them imagined. Over the next month, the 2 families found more and more reasons to spend time together. What began as an accidental meeting slowly evolved into weekend outings, shared meals, school events, and long conversations that neither Emma nor Daniel seemed eager to end. Sophie fit naturally into the lively group of Quadruplets. The 5 children quickly became inseparable. They spent afternoons at parks, competed in board games, built blanket forts, and created elaborate imaginary adventures that only made sense to them. Watching them together brought a quiet happiness to both parents. One Saturday morning, Daniel invited everyone to a charity event downtown. Emma assumed it would be a simple community gathering. The children were excited, and she saw no reason to decline. When they arrived, however, she immediately sensed something was different. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Reporters stood near the front doors. Several people seemed to recognize Daniel the moment he stepped out of the car. Before Emma could process what she was seeing, a well-dressed woman approached with a bright smile. "Mr. Brooks, the board members are already waiting for you." Emma noticed Daniel's expression change slightly. Not dramatically, but enough to catch her attention. The woman then looked toward Emma and the children. "And these must be your guests." Daniel nodded politely. "They are." As they entered the building, Emma's confusion continued to grow. Large banners displayed the name of a national logistics company. Photographs of Daniel appeared throughout the venue. Guests approached him constantly to shake hands and thank him for attending. Several referred to him as one of the most successful business leaders in the country. Emma finally stopped walking and stared at him. "What exactly do you do?" Daniel hesitated for the first time since they had met. That hesitation told her more than any answer could have. "I own the company hosting this event," he admitted. Emma looked around the enormous venue again. "You own all of this?" Daniel smiled sheepishly. "More or less." The revelation should have shocked her more than it did. Yet strangely, the first thing she thought about was not the money. It was the fact that he had never once mentioned it. He had never tried to impress her, never used his success to gain attention, never treated anyone differently because of status. The children interrupted before the conversation could continue. Ethan wanted to show Sophie an interactive display. Chloe had already discovered a dessert table. Within seconds, the 5 children disappeared toward another corner of the event. Daniel and Emma followed. Throughout the afternoon, Emma quietly observed him. Despite being surrounded by executives, investors, and influential guests, Daniel's focus remained on the children. He helped Mason fix a loose shoelace. He listened patiently to Olivia explain a school project. He made sure Sophie felt included in every activity. By the end of the day, one truth became impossible to ignore. The most impressive thing about Daniel was not his success. It was the way he treated people. Later that evening, as they walked toward the parking area, Emma finally smiled. "You know what surprises me?" Daniel glanced at her. "What?" "Finding out you are wealthy changed absolutely nothing." Daniel looked genuinely relieved. But neither of them noticed the photographer standing nearby. A camera flashed once as they walked together with the children. It seemed insignificant at the time. Unfortunately, that single photograph was about to attract attention from a world that rarely left successful people alone. The photograph appeared online the following morning. At first, neither Emma nor Daniel paid much attention to it. A local business website had published a short article covering the charity event. One image showed Daniel walking beside Emma, while the 5 children followed behind them laughing. It seemed harmless. Unfortunately, the internet rarely remained harmless for long. Within days, larger publications began reposting the photograph. Articles appeared questioning whether the successful businessman had found a new relationship. Comment sections filled with opinions from people who knew nothing about either of them. Some comments were kind, others were not. Emma tried ignoring the attention. She had never sought publicity and had no interest in becoming part of a public conversation. Yet the situation became increasingly difficult to avoid. One afternoon, a coworker approached her desk with a concerned expression. "Are you okay?" Emma looked confused. The coworker quietly showed her an article on a phone screen. Emma immediately felt her stomach tighten. The headline implied that she had entered Daniel's life because of his wealth. The article contained no evidence, no facts, just assumptions. Still, reading the words hurt more than she expected. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, Emma sat alone in her apartment thinking about everything she had read. The most frustrating part was how unfair it felt. Nobody had written about the hours she spent working. Nobody had written about the years she dedicated to raising her daughter alone. Strangers who had never met her were suddenly deciding who she was. Across the city, Daniel was dealing with similar frustration. Several business associates suggested he distance himself from the situation. One executive even implied that public perception could affect future partnerships. Daniel listened politely before ending the conversation. "Emma and her daughter are not public relations problems," he said firmly. "They are people I care about." Yet despite his support, the pressure continued building. The children remained mostly unaware of the situation. Fortunately, they were still focused on school, games, and weekend adventures. Sophie loved spending time with the Quadruplets. The 5 children had become their own little team. Watching them together only strengthened the bond between the 2 families. One Saturday afternoon, all six of them visited a local science museum. As the children explored exhibits and raced between displays, Emma found herself watching them with a smile. Daniel joined her near a large window overlooking the city. "They look happy," he said. "They do." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emma asked a question that had been on her mind for days. "Does this ever get easier?" Daniel understood immediately. He was not talking about parenting. He was talking about the attention, the criticism, the constant judgment from strangers. Daniel looked out the window before answering honestly. "No, but eventually you stop letting other people decide who you are." Emma nodded slowly. She wanted to believe that. More than anything, she wanted to protect Sophie from becoming part of something complicated. Yet every time she considered stepping back, she saw the happiness growing between the children and the genuine care Daniel showed all of them. Walking away suddenly seemed much harder than staying. As they left the museum later that afternoon, Sophie slipped her hand into Emma's and smiled. "Can we see them again tomorrow?" Emma looked ahead at Daniel and the quadruplets laughing together. Then she smiled. "I think that can be arranged." What she did not realize was that her answer marked the moment when two separate families quietly began becoming one. As autumn deepened across Seattle, the connection between the two families became impossible to ignore. What had started as a chance encounter now felt like a natural part of daily life. Weekends were often spent together. School events became group activities. Birthday parties included all five children. Even ordinary errands somehow turned into shared adventures. For the first time in years, Emma felt as though she was not carrying every responsibility alone. Daniel felt it too. Yet while their personal lives grew stronger, outside pressure continued to grow. The articles never completely disappeared. Every few weeks, a new story surfaced online. Some questioned Emma's motives. Others speculated endlessly about Daniel's future. Most of it was meaningless, but constant attention had a way of wearing people down. One afternoon, Emma arrived at work to find another article circulating among coworkers. The headline once again suggested that she was benefiting from Daniel's success. Nobody said anything directly to her, but she noticed the looks, the whispers, the curiosity. By lunchtime, she felt exhausted. That evening, she sat alone in her apartment after Sophie had gone to bed. For the first time, a difficult thought entered her mind. Maybe she was making life harder for everyone involved. Maybe Daniel and the children would be better off without the constant attention that followed their relationship. The idea hurt, but she could not ignore it. The following weekend, Daniel invited everyone to a community fall festival. Normally, Emma would have accepted immediately. This time she hesitated. Daniel noticed. "What is wrong?" Emma forced a smile. "Nothing." But Daniel knew her well enough by now to recognize when she was hiding something. Later that evening, after the children became distracted by games and activities, he gently asked again. This time Emma told him the truth. She explained how tired she felt, how frustrating it was to be judged by strangers, how worried she was about Sophie growing up around constant public attention. Daniel listened quietly without interrupting. When she finished, neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Emma looked down and said the words she had been avoiding. "Maybe I should step back for a while." Daniel felt his heart sink. "Step back." Emma nodded slowly. Maybe it would be easier for everyone. For the first time since they met, genuine sadness appeared in Daniel's eyes. Not anger, not frustration, just disappointment. "Is that what you want?" he asked. Emma immediately realized she did not know how to answer. Because the truth was she did not want distance. She did not want separation. She simply wanted peace. Before either could continue, a familiar voice interrupted them. "Why are you both so serious?" Chloe stood nearby holding a caramel apple. The children had returned without either adult noticing. Within seconds, Sophie, Ethan, Mason, and Olivia joined her. The five children looked from one parent to the other with growing concern. Sophie spoke first. "Did something happen?" Emma and Daniel exchanged a glance. Neither wanted to involve the children in adult problems. Yet the children had become part of this story too. As the evening continued, Emma watched the five of them laughing together beneath strings of festival lights. She realized something important. The relationship was no longer only about her and Daniel. Five children had built friendships that felt like family. Walking away would affect all of them. Later that night, Daniel stood alone on his balcony overlooking the city. For the first time in years, he was afraid of losing something truly important. And deep inside, He knew that if he wanted to protect the future they were building together, he was about to face a choice that could change everything. The week following the fall festival became one of the most important periods of Daniel's life. For years, he had approached every challenge the same way. He analyzed the problem, developed a strategy, and found a solution. Business had always been predictable. Numbers made sense. Markets followed patterns. Relationships were different. There was no spreadsheet capable of measuring what Emma and the children now meant to him. Every day, he replayed their conversation in his mind. He understood why Emma felt overwhelmed. The attention had not been fair. The criticism had not been deserved. Yet he also knew something else. If he remained silent, outside voices would continue, controlling their future. For the first time, he realized that protecting his family required more than simply caring about them. It required action. Meanwhile, Emma tried focusing on work and daily routines. Sophie noticed the change immediately. One evening, while they were preparing dinner together, her daughter looked up from the kitchen table. "Are you sad?" Emma smiled softly. "Why would you ask that?" Sophie shrugged. "Because you miss them." Children often reached conclusions adults spent weeks avoiding. Emma could not deny it. She missed all of them. She missed Olivia's endless curiosity. She missed Mason's confidence. She missed Ethan's imagination. She missed Chloe's honesty. Most of all, she missed Daniel. A few days later, Daniel attended a major company meeting. Several executives presented an ambitious expansion proposal that promised enormous financial rewards. The project would require years of international travel and even greater public exposure. Investors were enthusiastic. Business analysts predicted tremendous growth. Under normal circumstances, Daniel would have approved the plan immediately. Instead, he surprised everyone in the room. After listening carefully to every presentation, he stood and addressed the board. "For most of my career, I believe success was measured by growth, revenue, and market share," he said. "I do not believe that anymore." The room fell silent. Daniel continued, "I built this company to create opportunities and improve lives. If success comes at the cost of the people who matter most, then it is not success." Moments later, he formally rejected the proposal. News of the decision spread quickly throughout the business world. Reporters questioned his reasoning. Industry experts expressed surprise. Daniel did not care. For the first time, he had chosen family over ambition. Several days later, he took another step. During a televised charity event, a reporter asked directly about recent stories involving his personal life. The audience expected him to avoid the question. Instead, Daniel answered honestly. He spoke about Emma's character, her work ethic, and the incredible mother she was. He publicly rejected the false assumptions that had followed her for months. Most importantly, he made it clear that she deserved respect, not judgment. Emma happened to see the interview that evening. She sat quietly in her living room while Sophie finished homework nearby. Every word felt sincere. There was no attempt to impress anyone. No carefully crafted public relations statement. Just honesty. For several minutes after the interview ended, Emma remained silent. Then Sophie looked up. "That was nice." Emma nodded. "Yes, it was." Something inside her shifted. For months, Daniel had shown kindness through actions. Now he had willingly placed his own reputation on the line to defend her. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. Across the city, Daniel stood alone after the interview ended. He had no idea whether his decision would change anything. He only knew he could not lose Emma without fighting for the future they deserved. What he did not know was that Emma had already made a decision of her own, and it was about to lead both families back to the place where their story first began. 1 year later, a familiar cafe stood quietly beneath the afternoon sun. The same tables remained near the windows. The same smell of fresh coffee filled the air. The same comfortable atmosphere welcomed customers escaping the rush of everyday life. Yet for Emma Parker, everything had changed. She sat at a table near the center of the cafe and smiled as laughter filled the room. Across from her sat Daniel Brooks. Around them sat 5 energetic children who somehow seemed even louder than they had been a year earlier. Sophie, Ethan, Olivia, Mason, and Chloe filled the space with stories, jokes, and endless conversations. Looking at them now, it was difficult to imagine a time when they had been strangers. Emma glanced toward the empty chair beside her and felt a wave of emotion. A year ago, she had sat in almost the same spot staring at an empty seat, wondering why someone had failed to show up. She remembered the embarrassment, the disappointment, the loneliness. Back then, she had believed the day was a complete disaster. Now she understood it had actually been the beginning of something extraordinary. Daniel seemed to be thinking about the same memory. "You know," he said with a smile, "I almost did not stop here that afternoon." Emma laughed softly. "And I almost left 5 minutes before you arrived." Chloe immediately gasped. Then none of this would have happened. The children looked genuinely horrified by the possibility. Sophie pointed dramatically toward the two adults. "That would have been a terrible decision." Everyone laughed. The truth was difficult to ignore. A few minutes in either direction, and their lives might never have crossed paths. Over the past year, they had built something neither Emma nor Daniel expected to find. The children had become inseparable. Holidays were celebrated together. School events became family events. Weekend traditions formed naturally. Most importantly, trust had replaced uncertainty. The outside attention eventually faded. Public opinion moved on to other stories. What remained was something real. As the afternoon continued, Daniel grew unusually quiet. Emma noticed immediately. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Daniel smiled nervously. That alone captured the attention of all 5 children. "Dad is nervous," Mason announced. Olivia looked shocked. "Can that happen?" Daniel laughed while reaching into his jacket pocket. The moment Emma saw the small box, her eyes widened. Instantly, 5 children fell completely silent. For perhaps the first time in history, not one of them said a word. Daniel stood and walked around the table. Every customer nearby seemed to sense something important was happening. Then he stopped beside Emma. "1 year ago, I walked into this cafe with 4 children and more responsibilities than I knew how to manage," he said. "I thought I was simply stopping for coffee. Instead, I found someone who changed all of our lives." Emma felt tears forming. Daniel continued, "You brought kindness, strength, and joy into our family. You taught me that success means nothing if it is not shared with people you love. Most importantly, you gave all of us a home we did not know we were missing." Then he knelt beside her chair. "Emma Parker, will you marry me?" The answer arrived. Before he even finished speaking. "Yes." The cafe immediately erupted with applause. Sophie cheered. Chloe jumped out of her chair. Ethan and Mason celebrated as though their favorite team had won a championship. Olivia cried happy tears before hugging everyone nearby. As Daniel slipped the ring onto Emma's finger, she looked around the table and realized something beautiful. The chair that had once been empty was empty no longer. It was surrounded by love, laughter, and the family that fate had quietly placed in front of her when she least expected it.